I think I just found the exact news that's going to launch us into the altcoin power cycle. And if you're new here, we have been dissecting this altcoin cycle for some time now. I gave you guys the exact dates. I gave you the exact reason. And we've been going through historical evidence on the most significant event in money-making history. There is nothing in the world that would make you more profits than the altcoin super cycle. But most people don't talk about the secondary cycle, which I coined the name power cycle. There's an overarching altcoin cycle, but then there's a specific smaller cycle that's usually about 30 to 45 days towards the tail end of the altcoin cycle. And that's what I want to study, because every great altcoin that you've heard of, XRP, Chainlink, all of the biggest, most lucrative altcoins typically got their start during the power cycle, and then they gassed out about 30 days later. So all of my information is going to be revolving around this. And if you appreciate this content, do me a favor, like the video, share it with a friend. I will be providing you guys with the most extensive altcoin research on the market, and we're going to continue the series. Last video, we went over 2017 and we studied the altcoin cycle around that period. I also went over the characteristics of the altcoin cycle and exactly how it's going to play out. We got some really interesting data, like when to sell all of your cryptocurrency, as well as how much money is made in this 2017 altcoin cycle. Now, what I want to do is dive specifically into the 2021 cycle and the exact reasons why this is going to do well. And I believe I found a very specific and consistent reason why we entered into the altcoin cycle, as well as why the entire market went into a bear cycle. So I'm going to give you guys some very exclusive information here. Let's jump into the screen. So last video, we went over a concept called the power cycle. And I briefly want to show you guys this, but it got really crazy and really detailed. But long story short, you know, when we have this Bitcoin dominance dropping, so this is the Bitcoin dominance chart. And basically this shows the dominance of Bitcoin in comparison to altcoins. So if you compared all of the altcoin price trajectory and, you know, compare that to Bitcoin, which one is stealing the show? When this drops, when Bitcoin dominance is falling, this is altcoin cycles. This is where altcoins typically do well. Now there's an overarching cycle, but then there's obviously a very exaggerated point. Look at that. That's crazy, right? Look at how exaggerated that is. This is what I call the power cycle. And it just so happens to be that around this time period is when the majority of the altcoin money is made. This is when we see the 100Xs, the 50Xs. Generally, altcoins typically do well in general, but this is when it gets crazy. And it happens to be that this is also the period when we have Bitcoin's top. So the bottom here, this pink color is Bitcoin's price. So we're looking at Bitcoin dominance dropping, then we're looking at Bitcoin's price. And it happens to be that somewhere within this power cycle, we have Bitcoin topping out. So not only is this a great indicator to understand the dynamics of the altcoin cycle, but it also really shows when the market's going to end, because I basically have made one simple theory. I think it's really clean, and I think it's an elegant theory, and it basically goes like this. My theory is that Bitcoin and the Bitcoin halving cycle is what starts the market. All of the excitement around Bitcoin, you know, Bitcoin spot ETF, Bitcoin halving, all of the Bitcoin news essentially pulls us into a major bull cycle. And then the altcoin news and the bubble popping of the altcoin and altcoins getting hacked, basically news about altcoins and the market. So the entire crypto cycle is started by Bitcoin halving. People think that the market is ended by Bitcoin, but the proof that I've been showing in my videos shows otherwise. The bubble popping with altcoins typically ends the market. So when the bubble pops, the entire market goes down, and I've been showing that in my videos, and I want to show you guys some clear evidence. So not only does this give you an altcoin history, but it also gives you of when to sell, which is very important. You want to sell in the most exciting times, right? So a lot of people have said this in the past where, you know, in the App Store, when we have Coinbase and Binance being the #1 apps on the App Store, that's a signal to where people are very excited and everybody and their mom is getting in on Coinbase. that's probably when you want to sell. So this kind of lines up with that theory of like when there's a lot of excitement and everybody's in crypto, it's time to sell. And I truly believe this. Because they're like exit liquidity, where people are very excited and everybody and their mom is getting in on Coinbase. That's probably when you want to sell. So this kind of lines up with that theory of like when there's a lot of excitement and everybody's in crypto, it's time to sell. And I truly believe this. Because they're like exit liquidity in crypto refers to when a big market maker drives up a coin's price to attract buyers, allowing them to sell large holdings at a higher price, maximizing their profits while the buyers potentially suffer losses as the price falls. So basically, this is how it works every single cycle. Long story short, people with a lot of money and they buy coins. So it could be an initial seed into new coin projects. They essentially buy any cryptocurrency they can that's going to do well. So they'll be early stage investors, or even sometimes they'll create their own coins, and they essentially will put money into a coin. Now let's find some hypothetical numbers. Obviously, we don't know these numbers, but let's say hypothetically they put $10 million into some coins, right? And I'm going to just kind of do a coin right there. Now, they have all of these coins. See, the problem is, the adoption is really low at this time period. Nobody's really buying, right? There's no hype, right? They essentially have to offload these coins, and this is normal business practice. Just think about it for a second. Like when you buy a whole bunch of shoes, let's say you're creating your own shoes from scratch. If you bought a whole bunch of shoes, you need to run some type of campaign, whether it's an organic campaign or a paid campaign to sell those shoes. So right now they have a whole bunch of coins, but they're valueless because they have no one to sell it to. So long story short, what they do is they'll put like another $10 million. And again, these are hypothetical numbers. We don't know the exact amount, but they'll put like another $10 million into advertising. So they'll spend money on ads, whether it's Super Bowl commercials, it could be paid advertising campaigns, it could be paying influencers, it could be marketing plans. There's so many different ways to get people to buy into your product. And they have the best of the best marketers in the world because all they're trying to do is offload these coins. So this is the reason I believe we go into altcoin cycles or cycles in general. So Bitcoin and the Bitcoin halving event sends us into a overarching cycle, but they use that hype and they run their own advertising campaign. So let's say hypothetically, their goal is to get a 10x. As the market goes up, they essentially started it by running advertising campaigns. So usually you'll see big announcements like MasterCard adds crypto. And this is why I do something called timeline price analysis. And I'm going to explain what that is. Timeline price analysis is something we created at CoinPix, and we do it to essentially examine a sequence of events that correlate with significant price movements of a cryptocurrency, identifying strategic points where the major news or events have directly influenced the rise or fall of its value. So essentially, I'm looking at the events that drove adoption to the overarching market. I'm looking at a timeline of events, like what stories were driven into this market to lead us into a bull cycle. And I believe this is the most effective use of my time. It's better than technical analysis. It's better than even fundamental analysis, in my opinion, because it's the direction of the market. But I usually use this in combination with fundamental analysis. But I think it's so important because what it does is it explains the stories that drove adoption. It explains the psychological element of the market, the intangible element that nobody could understand. Everything you've ever bought came from a story understanding, and every business has a story. So what happens is we have expert marketers at strategic points that inject stories into the market via advertising campaigns to make this go viral. And these stories, the study of that is something called narrative economics. Narrative economics is the study of how stories, ideas, and cultural narratives influence economic behavior, market trends, and decision-making. And it just so happens to be that narrative economics is one of the most underutilized studies in economics in general. And it just so happens to be that I believe, being that these cryptocurrencies are world adoption vehicles. Cryptocurrencies are closer to a social media post than it is an actual stock. This is why you see the coin pump when Elon Musk puts out a tweet. It's all story based. These are communities of people that are all buying into a story. Most of these coins do not have a working product. This is why meme coins right now are the most lucrative coins in the entire market. If you look at Solana meme coins, Base meme coins, or any of the meme coin market, it just so happens to be that they have made the most percentages this cycle and they have no product attached to it. It's all about stories. Stories drive demand and it drives people to buy things. And the study of those stories is narrative economics. Listen to what I'm saying. As an analyst, you have to identify what's the most lucrative opportunity. And I've been showing you guys that understanding the altcoin cycle is the most important element by far. So I study narrative economics for a reason and I focus on it. And everything you're going to get in this video is going to be timeline price analysis on the narratives of the market. So if we have a project that has $10 million worth of coins that are worth nothing because they can't sell it to nobody and there's no hype, and then we have a $10 million advertising campaign, what's gonna happen is that if we have a whole bunch of entities, let's just say we have this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy, they all have so much money, they all start doing it at one period of time, it drives the market up, and if they're all looking for a 10x, their goal is to probably get as many people as they possibly can into the market, try to get as many people to buy in the entire time while they're offloading all of those initial purchases that they made at such a strategic low price. They can get these deals, guys, they get the deals. They buy the coin before they even launch on centralized exchanges. Think about it, market maker, right? Why do they call it a market maker? They make markets. Listen, so for example, let's say I have a coin project and I want to sell it. Let's call it Alex token. I have to put it on a centralized exchange with liquidity. I need liquidity so that people can buy and sell it. How are people going to buy it from me or sell it from me if I don't have any money, right? Because if you look at every pair, there's the original token and then there's something worth value. There's ETH or USDC. So either I have my own liquidity and I put it in a decentralized exchange, or I sell it to a centralized exchange. Listen to what I'm saying. I could sell my tokens. I could be like, all right, hey, I'm going to sell it to you for 50 cents a token. They get the cheapest prices. So they're over here buying all of these tokens for the low from all of these coin projects for the cheapest prices possible. And then they're running advertising campaigns to their own platform. So they don't need to make an advertising campaign, for example, for the coin. They need to make an advertising campaign for Binance or Coinbase, the centralized exchange. All we need to do is drive adoption to my platform and they'll indirectly buy the coins that we purchase from the coin founders. Are you listening? And people also don't understand this element. So let's say hypothetically we got a 10x, right? So the entire market goes up, there's a 10x. There's something called exit liquidity. So at the top here, we have an event where people essentially, the big massive amount of people like the general public, like Super Bowl advertisements, top downloads in the App Store, like right here. And that is the power cycle when we have mass adoption. And that's also when they sell. So if they have a 10x on all of their crypto that they purchased, when they start selling, they don't receive a 10x. So if they put 10 million in, they're not going to take back $100 million because there's something called slippage. In liquidity, as they sell, if they sell here, they sell here, they sell here, they get a less and less favorable price because as they sell, they are driving the price of the coin down. Slippage refers to the difference between the expected price of a trade and the actual price, often occurring when large orders like selling hundreds of millions of a coin cause the price to drop due to insufficient liquidity in the market. So for them to get the best slippage, they want to drive more people in. So this is why this is the best time to make money, because that's when the price of the coin goes up the most. That's when the advertising campaigns are spending the most money. They can, and that's when they're selling. So it's like this small period of time where they drive it up and then they start selling large amounts. And that's where you sell as well. And so when they're selling, they don't really get a 10x. They get more like a 7x or a 5x based off of how good their marketing campaigns were right here. And this is how the market works. They drop advertising campaigns at the bottom and the top. And their goal is to try to get in and get out. So they're driving the market up, then they're running other advertising campaigns to essentially get out. In both situations, they're dumping money into paid advertising to control the psychology of the entire market. So let's take a look at the actual psychology of the market. So again, we're looking at Bitcoin dominance. So you understand this chart. We're going to be diving into this chart extremely detailed. Bitcoin dominance drops. Bitcoin price right here. We have the Bitcoin dominance dropping, and then we have the power cycle. Now, we already looked at that last video. Now, the second one is right here. We have Bitcoin dominance dropping. This is the altcoin cycle. And then this right here is the power cycle. So, and we have the top of Bitcoin. So that's something that's really consistent about these power cycles and these altcoin cycles, is that we have a general altcoin cycle, power cycle, very exaggerated drop. And there's usually, during the exaggerated drop, AKA the power cycle, there's usually the top of a Bitcoin price, which is interesting. Now, obviously we have a second top here. This wasn't the complete top. This was like Bitcoin's first top. If you look back into this, 2021 cycle, was very manipulative. Like, this was super manipulated, like with Tesla and all these things. And I'm not going to go into detail about that, but if you would have sold here, you would have been pretty straight, because although we had a run back up, it didn't really get too far above that. So to me, this was like a scam, manipulative pump. It was really ridiculous, but getting out here would have been pretty nice, to be honest. That would have been phenomenal. Most people did not get out at this price of Bitcoin. So it's something to pay attention to. So what I want to do is show you guys again, the history of the marketing campaigns and the narratives and the psychology around the market. So we're going to open this up here and basically dive into it. So let's go into specifically, what happened after the Bitcoin halving. So this blue line here is the Bitcoin halving. Again, my theory basically says that basically this starts the entire market. With a decrease of issuance of Bitcoin, the scarcity element that's built into Bitcoin literally starts the market. And it started with that. Then we had MicroStrategy essentially getting bullish and making their first initial purchase ever of Bitcoin around August 11th of 2020. So you can see right here, Bitcoin's price didn't really react. So MicroStrategy got in pretty early, and that was like the biggest cosign that we've seen. So if you guys are taking notes, which I highly recommend, I think the first thing you should kind of write down is we have big cosigns. Big cosigns start markets. So for example, when Elon Musk co-signed it, when we have JP Morgan co-signed it, we talked about last cycle in 2017, where we had the Ethereum Alliance forming, and that basically started the altcoin cycle. So that's like a big cosign from 500 companies all coming together to essentially drive adoption on Ethereum. Think about that for a second, right? So major cosign from big entities are a part of adoption. It's a big narrative. It's a narrative that goes viral, that everybody wants to be a part of. It's very easy to understand. It's very simple. MicroStrategy bought Bitcoin. Very simple. You don't need to understand anything. You don't need to research it. We have a big company buying Bitcoin. That's important to understand. That's a big part of bull cycles that start things. And then we have a very, very interesting marketing campaign, our first big marketing campaign. Now, this is important. This right here is in October specifically. And the reason why it's so important is because this was very strategic. Binance ran a paid advertising campaign, and I'm going to show it to you right now. As you can see right here, Binance Google Play preview, new home screen, very, very paid advertising. This is not organic. This is straight up an advertisement. And they launched it on October 1st, 2020. Now, I don't think you guys understand the significance of this. So I want to reiterate, this got 11 million views. And again, what they did is they drove adoption to Binance, which is the biggest altcoin exchange in the world. Let me say it again. They paid money for people to come to Binance. I believe this is very similar to what I explained to you. They already had a whole bunch of coins. They were loaded up. They understood the Bitcoin halving cycle. They bought way back in the day. They usually will buy at the exact bottom. They create the floor price. So from the previous 2017 cycle, they're buying like in 2018. When the 2017 cycle, that's when they start buying all the new coins. They'll continue to buy throughout the bear market, but in general, they were already loaded up on their bags. Then what they did is they did a paid advertising campaign. I believe this has started everything, because this was the most significant that happened in the bear market. And if you look at our current cycle right now, like the 2023, 2024 cycle, 2025, what we're currently experiencing, Coinbase did the exact same thing. We had basically, and that'll be the future video. So the next video, we'll dive into our current cycle and how all of this applies to our current cycle, make some predictions. We've already talked about the dates of like the exact time of when I believe the altcoin cycle is going to start, but let's dive into some other types of predictions. That will be the next video. But right here, we see Binance basically pumping the entire market at the bottom. And at the same exact time, this current cycle, we had Coinbase do the same thing. So Coinbase was essentially running paid advertising campaigns, literally almost a year ago at the exact bottom. While FTX Exchange filed for bankruptcy, we go to the exact bottom. Somebody buys a lot of FTX Exchange funds to bail them out. And then we have Coinbase running paid advertising campaigns to bring us back into a bull market. It was very crazy, but the next video is gonna be interesting. But let's look deeper into this for ourselves. And again, we have another big cosign. So we have PayPal adding cryptocurrency support. So Binance Google Play was just a pure marketing campaign, right? MicroStrategy was a purchase, so it's demand and marketing. And PayPal adding cryptocurrency support is news. So this is like a narrative, this is a story. This is also demand, because for them to actually add support, that means that they have to buy some cryptocurrency and have it in the reserve. And it's a connection in traditional finance. So this is like a 3-element narrative. So it actually has utility to it because they're adding cryptocurrency support. I mean, PayPal basically processed 1.36 trillion in total payment volume in 2022 with 431 million active accounts globally, making it one of the largest digital payment platforms in the world. So that's a big cosign, a multi-directional cosign. It's not just a narrative, it's actual integration. Now, all of this is important because it's adding to the story. We have Binance running a paid advertising campaign. Then we have PayPal coming in trying to take a piece of that pie, and the story will build more and more. And the next major part of the story, after PayPal adds support, is the launch of an Ethereum 2.0 beacon chain. So this is an upgrade of Ethereum. So when it comes to these events and these narratives, it's not usually one thing that's consistently happening every time. It's usually like one of them. So what I'm doing, and again, this is for future videos, what I'm doing is I'm putting in together categories of narratives that have started altcoin cycles, that have started bull runs, and that have ended markets. And I want to essentially get a plethora of each category. So if any of them happen during the altcoin cycle, it will give us indicators on what the market's going to do. And this is going to be very interesting. I'm essentially categorizing narratives. And so again, as you can see right here, we have the launch of the Ethereum 2.0. That didn't really send us into the altcoin cycle, right? Because the altcoin cycle specifically is right here. This is when Bitcoin dominance topped out and dropped. What happened right here? And as you can see, we have essentially the adoption of clarity in the regulatory environment. So on January 4th, 2021, literally a day off of this big fall, the US Office of the Comptroller of the Currency OCC issued guidance allowing banks to use stablecoins for payments, making a critical step for DeFi's integration into the financial system. So we have regulation. So if we look before pre-altcoin cycle, we have the first big news, which is demand, right? MicroStrategy's buying Bitcoin. They're taking coins off the market. That's considered demand and also a cosign. So this is like a dual narrative. It's a demand narrative and it's cosigning crypto, right? Because this is their first big purchase. The second one with Binance was just purely an advertising campaign. So this was an advertising campaign that they put money into, which 11 million or 12 million views. And that narrative is just purely, hey, buy coins on Binance. The third narrative was PayPal. So that's a cosign. That's demand because they essentially have to buy the Bitcoin to fulfill this, right? Like they have to have liquidity. So if people bought Bitcoin, they can give them the Bitcoin. So they had to buy it themselves. So it's a cosign, it's demand, and it's integration. They're integrating into the cryptocurrency ecosystem. So there's kind of like a triple whammy there. Then we have an Ethereum upgrade. And then the last one is essentially the actual regulatory clarity. So if you look at it, those narratives were enough to send us into an altcoin cycle. And the entire time Bitcoin was going up in price, but this really led us to the last hurrah. Because if you don't even look at like, for example, the altcoin cycle, this was also like the big last leg for, Bitcoin itself. This pink line here is Bitcoin's price. So we have all these events, and it kind of skyrocketed us in the last, big leg of Bitcoin's price. So these events are very important to understand so we can make predictions for future events. Like for the next video, we're going to specifically talk about, have these events happened in our current market? And what would be the next trigger event? I basically have the answer on what exactly needs to happen for us to get sent into an altcoin cycle. But long story short, that exact piece of news was the reason why we got sent into an altcoin cycle in 2021. And then from there, we have other news like Coinbase IPO, initial public offering. We have Tesla, buying Bitcoin. We have Visa and MasterCard integration. And then the thing that sent us into a power cycle was Fidelity Bitcoin spot ETF filing. Now, first off, for this explanation, you need to understand what a spot ETF is. And this is very important. This is like one of the big indicators is Bitcoin legit news. And towards the end of the video, I'm going to give you the theory and you'll see how I back this theory up. But Fidelity filed for a spot ETF. This is considered news. That's all it is. It's news, right? Because they didn't get the ETF, they filed for it. Now, there's a difference between a futures ETF and a spot ETF. A futures ETF basically makes an artificial Bitcoin for people to buy and sell, meaning there's no supply shock. And if you know anything about Bitcoin, the whole thing about Bitcoin is supply shock. So when the spot ETF launched at the beginning of this year, that actually caused a supply shock and caused the price of Bitcoin to go up. This is what I kept telling people. I'm like, hey, bro, like this is real. They're actually taking Bitcoin off the market and they're capitalizing on Bitcoin's greatest power, which is scarcity, right? Very, very important. But this right here was just the news. So the news of them filing for a Bitcoin spot ETF sent us into the power cycle. And at the same exact time, shortly after, we had Bitcoin's top. So very, very important. Listen to what I'm saying. Big news like that. And the best way I can categorize it or explain it is like big, super legit news. So news that's extremely legitimate, that's like close to the government or the SEC, something that's like really crazy, usually ends the market, the tops. And I'll show you right here, because look, Fidelity filed for the spot ETF. We enter the power cycle, and then the top was literally a couple of days after. I mean, we're talking about 12 days after was the exact top of Bitcoin. And I believe if Trump gets elected, he's going to input policies. He made it very clear that will make it very clear for, DeFi projects and cryptocurrency projects to be able to grow and expand. People are going to get bullish. That will send us into the general altcoin market. So I think it's Trump gets elected. He makes some type of regulatory action that enters us into an altcoin market. And then somewhere down the line, he launches the Bitcoin strategic reserve. That enters us into a power cycle. And then the market ends like 15 days later. The Bitcoin will top. I believe Bitcoin will top, then we'll make all of our money, and then now it's time to sell. That's my official prediction. Let me know if you guys have any questions. Leave a comment below. If you like the quality of this content, hit like. If you don't, leave some constructive criticism. Subscribe for more video updates. And like I always say, if you don't get with it, you will get left behind. Catch you guys later. Peace out.